The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of silver metal that caught the light of distant stars. Inside, 47 species gathered in fear. Their seats rose in circular tiers, each designed for bodies that had never known true danger. The Valaxi with their delicate wings, the Karathi with their crystal-like skin, the Thranali who stood on 3 legs as thin as branches. All of them were beautiful. All of them were dying. Ambassador Kelrath stood at the center podium, her moth-like antennae trembling. She had called this emergency session, and now every eye in the chamber watched her. Some of those eyes had evolved to see in near darkness. Others could detect heat or ultraviolet light, but none of them had evolved to face what was coming. 12 systems, Kelrath said, her voice translated into 47 languages simultaneously. In 6 months, we have lost 12 systems to the consuming swarm. 4 trillion souls, gone. The chamber filled with the sounds of distress, clicks, whistles, harmonic vibrations. Each species expressed horror in their own way. Chancellor Vex of the Thranali rose from his seat, his tall frame casting shadows across the lower tiers. We have the finest weapons in the galaxy, Vex said, his 3 voices speaking in perfect harmony. Our particle beams can split atoms. Our shields can withstand the heart of a star. How can we not stop these creatures? Kelrath's wings drooped. Because they are not like us. The swarm does not build ships. They grow them. Our weapons burn their flesh, but they heal. They reproduce. For every bioship we destroy, 3 more take its place. They feel no fear, no mercy, no hesitation. A hologram appeared above the podium. It showed the last transmission from the Kalmar system before it went dark. The swarms, ships looked like enormous insects, their carapaces covered in weapons that fired living projectiles. They moved through space like a plague, consuming everything. Space stations, planets, even the stars seemed to dim in their presence. We have 6 months before they reach Valara Prime, Kelrath continued. Maybe less. Our projections show that within 2 years, the entire galactic arm will fall. We need help. From whom? Asked a Karathi representative, her crystalline body chiming with each word. We are the Galactic Council. We are the 47 civilizations that have achieved faster than light travel. We are the pinnacle of evolution. Who could possibly help us? Kelrath closed her eyes. This was the moment she had been dreading. The humans. The chamber exploded. Every species began speaking at once, their translators struggling to keep up. Kelrath heard words like madness and suicide and never again cutting through the chaos. She waited for the noise to die down, but it only grew louder. Chancellor Vex's voice finally rose above the rest. You propose we invite the Deathworlders back? Have you forgotten the incident of Red Stations? How could anyone forget? 300. Years ago, the Council had made first contact with humanity. They had been impressed. The humans were primitive by galactic standards, but they had achieved spaceflight on their own. They had survived on a planet that was classified as a death world. High gravity, dangerous weather, predators at every level of the food chain. The fact that humans had evolved there at all was remarkable. The Council had offered humanity a place among the stars. They had given them contracts as security forces, as guards, as soldiers. The humans had been grateful, and they had been terrifyingly good at violence. Kelrath remembered reading the reports. Human mercenaries had put down rebellions in days that had lasted years. They had boarded pirate vessels and cleared them room by room. They had fought hand to hand when their weapons failed. They had endured injuries that would kill any Council species and kept fighting. They had scared everyone. Then came Red Stations. A group of separatist Thranali had taken hostages in 5 orbital stations. They demanded independence or they would kill everyone. The Council had tried to negotiate. The humans had grown impatient. A human strike team had assaulted all 5 stations simultaneously. They had moved through corridors filled with vacuum and radiation. They had used explosive decompression as a weapon. They had killed every separatist within 3 hours. They had also killed 42 hostages in the crossfire. The humans had called it acceptable losses. The Council had called it barbarism. After that, the Council had paid the humans to leave, a fortune in rare metals and technology, enough to buy their departure and their silence. The humans had taken the payment and vanished into deep space. The Council had erased Earth's coordinates from every database. They had forbidden anyone from seeking humanity out. For 300 years, the galaxy had been peaceful. "I have not forgotten," Kelrath said quietly. "None of us have. But the Swarm does not negotiate. The Swarm does not take prisoners. The Swarm only consumes. We need someone who understands that kind of enemy." "And if the humans are worse than the Swarm?" Vex demanded. "If we trade one extinction for another? Then at least our children might survive to regret it." The vote took 6 hours. It was the closest decision in Council history. By a margin of only 3 votes, the motion passed. The Council would send a distress signal to humanity's last known trajectory. They would beg the Deathworlders to return. Kelrath stood in the communications bay as technicians prepared the beacon. It would transmit on all frequencies, carrying the Council's plea in every language, including the harsh, guttural sounds of English. She had written the message herself. "To humanity, the Galactic Council faces extinction. We ask for your help. We ask for your forgiveness. We ask that you remember we once stood together. Please, we are dying." The technician, a young Valaxi male, looked at her with dark eyes. "Do you think they will come?" Kelrath watched the beacon launch from the station, a tiny point of light carrying their last hope into the void. "I think they will come, and I think we will regret asking." The beacon disappeared into faster-than-light space. Somewhere in the darkness, the consuming swarm moved closer, and somewhere else, perhaps, the humans heard the call. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see which doom would arrive first. 3 months passed like a slow death. The swarm consumed 5 more systems. Refugees flooded into Council space by the billions, their ships old and breaking down. Every day, Kelrath watched the holographic displays showing red spreading across the galactic map like blood and water. Every day, she wondered if the humans had even received the message. Chancellor Vex gave speeches about Council resilience and superior technology. He ordered the construction of new defensive stations. He promised victory. But Kelrath saw the fear in his 3 eyes. She saw it in everyone. The swarm was coming and nothing could stop it. Then, on the 94th day after the beacon launched, every sensor array in Council space screamed at once. Kelrath was in her quarters when the alert came. She rushed to the observation deck, her wings barely keeping her aloft in her hurry. Other ambassadors were already there, staring at the main display with expressions of shock. "What is it?" Kelrath demanded. "Is it the swarm?" "No," whispered the Karathi technician at the sensor station. "It's them." The display showed the edge of Council space, a region they called the Whisper Dark because so few ships traveled there. Gravity sensors detected something massive emerging from faster-than-light travel. Not 1 ship. Not 10. Hundreds. The human fleet materialized like ghosts becoming solid. 200 warships dropped into normal space with a precision that made Council naval officers weep with envy. They formed up in perfect attack formation, each ship exactly where it needed to be. Kelrath stared at the ships and felt her heart skip. These were not the primitive vessels the humans had used 300 years ago. These ships were huge angular things covered in armor that seemed to drink in light. They bristled with weapons that Council sensors could not even identify. Each ship bore a name in English letters large enough to read from space. Indomitable. Remember Terra. Price of Exile. Never Forgive. Iron Covenant. And at the center of the formation, larger than any ship the Council had ever built, was the Dreadnought Reckoning. They came. Kelrath breathed. They actually came. The communication came through seconds later. A human face appeared on every screen in Council space simultaneously. The face belonged to a man with dark skin and gray hair cut military short. His eyes were hard as stone. This was Admiral Zhao Chen, commander of the human fleet. "Galactic Council," Zhao said, his voice cold enough to freeze hydrogen. "You called, we came. But we remember why we left." Chancellor Vex pushed forward, trying to take control of the situation. "Admiral Zhao, the Council is grateful for your response. We request immediate military assistance against the consuming swarm. We are prepared to offer You are prepared to offer nothing, Zhao interrupted. 300 years ago, you paid us to disappear. You erased our home from your maps. You called us monsters and barbarians. Now your children are dying, and suddenly you remember we exist. The silence in the observation deck was absolute. No one had ever spoken to the council this way. Vex's skin flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Kelrath stepped forward. You are right, she said simply. We were afraid of you. We still are. But our fear does not matter anymore. Trillions are dead, Admiral. Billions more will die. We are begging. Zhao studied her for a long moment. You are Valaxi. You wrote the message? Yes. Then you will be our liaison. We will help you fight the swarm, but we do it our way. No council oversight. No committees. No debates. We have full operational authority, or we leave right now. Vex began to protest, but Kelrath cut him off. Agreed. Good. Stand by for tactical data transfer. You are not going to like our battle plans. The data came through minutes later, and Kelrath understood what Zhao meant. The human plans were brutal. They included tactics the Council had banned thousands of years ago. Scorched world protocols, biological warfare contingencies, suicide attack formations, civilian evacuation priorities that assumed massive losses. One document was titled Acceptable Casualty Rates, and the numbers made Kelrath sick. The humans expected to lose 30% of their forces. 30%, and they considered this acceptable. A Karathi admiral reviewed the plans and turned to Kelrath with shaking hands. These are not military tactics. These are extinction protocols. They are survival protocols, Kelrath corrected quietly. There is a difference. The human fleet began moving into council space, and everywhere they went, they changed things. They took over orbital stations and turned them into fortresses. They conscripted civilian ships and armed them with weapons that violated a dozen treaties. They drilled council defense forces in tactics that emphasized speed and aggression over caution. A human officer came aboard the council station to brief them. His name was Commander Hayes, and he was missing his left arm below the elbow. A mechanical prosthetic had replaced it. He moved with a confidence that seemed unnatural in the low gravity that council species preferred. The swarm fights like a swarm, Hayes explained, highlighting a tactical display. They overwhelm through numbers. They expect you to run, so we do not run, we charge. We hit them hard enough that they cannot recover. We make them afraid. The swarm does not feel fear, Vex said dismissively. Hayes smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Everything feels fear when it meets something more dangerous than itself. You are about to learn that lesson too, Chancellor. That night, Kelrath found Zhao standing alone on an observation deck, watching his fleet through the transparent aluminum viewport. She approached carefully. Your people have advanced remarkably in 300 years, she said. Your technology rivals anything in council space. We had motivation, Zhao replied without looking at her. After you exiled us, we went deep into uncharted space. We found worlds. We found resources. We also found enemies, things that made us fight to survive. We lost a lot of people learning how to win. What did you find out there? That the universe does not care about fair. That mercy is a luxury for those strong enough to afford it. That you either become the predator or you become prey. He finally looked at her. You feared us when we were trying to be gentle. You are about to see what we became when we stopped trying. Kelrath felt cold despite her thick fur.
Are we making a mistake?
Bringing you back? Yes, Zhao said simply. But it is the only mistake that lets you survive. In a month, we engage the swarm at Kalmar system. Tell your people to watch. Tell them to understand. The age of peaceful civilization is over. War has returned to the galaxy. He walked away, leaving Kelrath alone with her thoughts. Outside the viewport, the human fleet hung in space like a sword waiting to fall. Each ship was a reminder that the Council had called for help and summoned something that might be worse than the enemy they faced. But it was too late to send them away. The swarm was coming, and the only thing standing between extinction and survival was humanity. Kelrath pressed her hand against the cold viewport and whispered a prayer to gods she was not sure existed anymore. She prayed that when this was over, there would still be a galaxy worth saving. The Kalmar system had been beautiful once. 4 planets orbited a yellow star, and 2 of them had supported thriving colonies. Now the swarm was there, converting everything into more of itself. Their bioships filled the system like locusts, stripping resources from asteroids and moons. The human fleet arrived with no warning and no mercy. Kelrath watched from the observation ship's silent witness, positioned at the edge of the system with other council observers. They were here to document the battle and report back to the council. None of them were prepared for what they saw. The human ships did not slow down. They came out of faster-than-light travel at full combat speed, their weapons already firing. Kinetic rounds the size of buildings tore through swarm bioships, energy beams that could melt steel carved paths through the enemy formation. Missiles exploded in clusters, each warhead carrying enough force to crack a moon. But what shocked Kelrath most was the human tactics. The Council fought battles at long range, using careful targeting and minimal risk. The humans did the opposite. They dove straight into the swarm formation like predators attacking prey. "They are insane," breathed the Threnali observer. "They will be surrounded and destroyed." But they were not destroyed. The human ships moved with impossible grace for their size. They used their own gravity wells as weapons, creating distortions that crushed swarm vessels together. When swarm bioships tried to grapple with them, the humans simply detonated shaped charges that ripped the enemy apart. One human destroyer took critical damage to its reactor. Instead of retreating, the ship accelerated directly into a cluster of swarm vessels and detonated itself. The explosion took out 17 enemy ships. They sacrificed their own ship. The Karathi observer said in horror. They killed their own crew. The crew was already dead, Kelrath said quietly, reading the tactical data. Reactor breach. They had minutes to live, so they made their deaths matter. The battle raged for 6 hours. The human fleet carved through the swarm like a blade through flesh. But the swarm was not defenseless. They swarmed damaged ships, covering them with living matter that ate through armor. They fired projectiles that burrowed into hulls and hatched inside, releasing creatures that killed crews from within. Then Kelrath saw something that would haunt her forever. A swarm boarding pod had attached to a human cruiser. The council observers watched through hacked camera feeds as the pod burned through the hull and released swarm warriors into the ship. The warriors were nightmare creatures. Each one was 3 meters tall with 6 limbs ending in claws that could cut through steel. Their carapaces were thick enough to stop most small arms fire. They moved through the corridors like living weapons, killing everything in their path. But then they met the humans. The human Marines wore powered armor that made them even larger than the swarm warriors. They carried weapons that fired explosive rounds and superheated plasma. But what made them terrifying was not their equipment. It was their complete lack of fear. The humans did not retreat. They did not panic. They formed firing lines in the corridors and killed everything that came at them. When their ammunition ran out, they switched to backup weapons. When those ran out, they used their armored fists and feet. One human Marine grabbed a swarm warrior and snapped its neck with augmented strength. The fight was brutal and short. Every swarm warrior died. 3 human Marines died with them. The survivors immediately began repairing the breach and preparing for the next boarding attempt. "How?" the Karathi observer whispered. "How can they be so calm?" Admiral Zhao's voice came through their communication system. He had been listening to their conversation. "Because they trained for this. Every human child grows up learning that the universe is dangerous. We train our soldiers to fight in conditions that would kill your species in seconds. We evolved on a world where everything wanted to eat us. This is just another day for them." The battle ended when the human fleet used something they called a Nova Lance. It was a weapon that focused stellar radiation into a beam that could cut a planet in half. They aimed it at the largest swarm bioship, the one that served as a command node, and fired. The beam took 17 seconds to cross the system. When it hit, the bioship simply ceased to exist. The thermal bloom from its destruction was visible from 3 light-years away. With their command ship gone, the remaining swarm vessels lost coordination. The human fleet hunted them down one by one, showing no mercy and taking no prisoners. By the time the last swarm ship died, the Kalmar system was full of debris and the radiation from human weapons. Kelrath reviewed the casualty reports and felt sick. The humans had lost 32 ships and over 40,000 crew. 30% of their force, exactly as their projections predicted, and they were already planning the next battle. The silent witness received a request to dock with the Reckoning. Zhao wanted to brief the observers personally. Kelrath went with 3 other ambassadors, nervous about entering the human flagship. The difference was immediate. Human ships had gravity that felt like carrying rocks on your back. The air was too thick, too rich in oxygen. The lighting was harsh and bright. Everything about the environment was uncomfortable for council species, but the humans moved through it like it was nothing. Zhao met them in a briefing room that was decorated with images of Earth. Kelrath saw oceans and mountains and forests. She also saw predators, lions, bears, sharks, creatures that had hunted humans for millions of years. "Welcome to the reckoning," Zhao said. "You wanted to understand how we fight, so I will show you." He activated a holographic display showing a human in training. The person was young, barely an adult. They were in a chamber that simulated various environments. Kelrath watched as the chamber filled with water. Then the water froze. Then it boiled. Then the gravity increased until the person could barely stand. Through it all, the human kept training, kept fighting simulated enemies. "This is standard conditioning for our military," Zhao explained. "We train in vacuum, in extreme heat and cold, in high radiation. We train to fight when wounded, when exhausted, when all hope is gone. We call it the Death World Doctrine, because we came from a death world and we never forgot what that means." "It is barbaric," said the Threnali observer. "It is survival," Zhao corrected. "Your species evolved in paradise. Low gravity, abundant resources. No predators. You never had to fight to exist, we did. Every day of our evolution was a battle. We did not become the dominant species on Earth by being gentle. We became dominant by being more dangerous than everything that tried to kill us." Kelrath thought about the battle she had witnessed. The ruthless efficiency, the casual acceptance of death, the complete willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. "You are not like us," she said softly. "No," Zhao agreed. "We are not, and that is why you called us. The swarm cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be negotiated with. They only understand strength, so we will be strong. We will be violent. We will be everything the council fears, and when this is over, you will be alive to fear us." Before they could leave, alarms blared throughout the ship. A swarm attack on a nearby council station. The human fleet prepared to launch immediately. Kelrath watched the crew move with practiced precision, every person knowing exactly what to do. A human sergeant passed by, a woman with scars on her face and cold eyes. Her name tag read Torres. She glanced at the observers and smiled. "Stay safe, ambassadors," Torres said. "Watch and learn. This is what we do." As the reckoning accelerated toward the next battle, Kelrath understood the terrible truth. The council had not called for allies. They had unleashed something that had been contained for 300 years. The humans were not here to save the galaxy. They were here to remind everyone what real predators looked like. 6 months changed everything. The human fleet pushed the swarm back system by system, battle by battle. They fought in asteroid fields and nebulas. They fought in the gravity wells of black holes and in the radiation storms of dying stars. Everywhere they went, they won. And everywhere they won, they left questions about the cost. Kelrath had become humanity's unofficial voice in the council. She defended their methods in chambers where other ambassadors called for human restraint. She explained their tactics to species that had never known true war. She tried to make them understand that survival was not clean or pretty. But even she struggled with some of the reports that crossed her desk. The humans had retaken the Viridian system using a weapon called the Scorcher. It created a wave of radiation that sterilized everything it touched. The swarm died. So did every microbe on every world. The system was saved, but it was also dead. Nothing would grow there for 10,000 years. In the Helix cluster, humans had deployed biological weapons that targeted the swarm's genetic structure. The weapons worked perfectly. They also mutated and spread to other species in nearby systems. Millions died before the plague burned itself out. The humans apologized and promised to be more careful next time. At the outer rim, a human battle group had been surrounded by swarm forces. Instead of surrendering, they had crashed their ships into the swarm vessels at relativistic speeds. The kinetic energy released was equivalent to antimatter weapons. The human crews died instantly. So did every swarm ship within a light second. The council tried to hold emergency sessions to discuss these methods. Chancellor Vex called them war crimes. The Karathi demanded trials. The younger species wanted the humans restrained or expelled again. Admiral Zhao came to the council chamber in person. He stood at the center of the floor, a human among aliens, and he showed no fear. "You want to talk about crimes?" Zhao asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Let me tell you about crimes. Before we arrived, you had lost 17 systems, 5 trillion souls, You sat in these comfortable seats and debated and discussed and accomplished nothing. The swarm kept coming. Your people kept dying. We were trying to find a civilized solution, Vex said, his three voices harmonizing with indignation. There is no civilized solution to extinction, Zhao said flatly. You wanted to survive. We are making you survive. But survival is not pretty. Survival means making choices that haunt you forever. We learned that lesson 300 years ago when you abandoned us. Kelrath spoke up from her seat. What happened after we exiled you, Admiral? You have never told us. For a moment, Zhao's hard expression softened into something that might have been pain. We went deep into uncharted space. We found a beautiful system with 3 habitable worlds. We called it New Hope. We started building colonies. We had 50 million people there. Then we discovered we were not alone. The chamber went silent. Something lived in that system before us. Something old and territorial. They did not communicate. They just attacked. We tried to evacuate. We tried to negotiate. We tried everything your council would have approved of. And we lost everything. 40 million people died in 2 months. The survivors escaped with nothing but what they could carry. Zhao's hands clenched into fists. That is when we changed. We stopped trying to be what you wanted us to be. We became what we needed to be to survive. We found other human colonies scattered across space. We united them. We built weapons you cannot imagine. We became hard. And when we were strong enough, we went back to that system and we killed everything that had killed us. We sterilized 3 worlds to make sure it could never happen again. You committed genocide, a Karathi ambassador said, horrified. Yes, Zhao said without hesitation. And we would do it again. Because now our children live. Now humanity survives. You called us monsters 300 years ago for being too violent. We became real monsters to stay alive. And now you need monsters to save you from the swarm. The vote to continue human military operations passed, but barely. The council was fracturing. Some species supported humanity. Others feared them more than the swarm. And some, like the Threnali under Chancellor Vex, began plotting in secret. Kelrath discovered the plot by accident. She was reviewing supply line data when she noticed discrepancies. Human shipments were being delayed. Human supply stations were suffering mysterious equipment failures. Someone was sabotaging the war effort. She dug deeper and found coded messages between Threnali military commanders. They were planning to attack human supply lines and blame it on the swarm. Their logic was simple. If the humans were weakened, the council could negotiate a peace with the swarm. They could surrender some systems and save the rest. Kelrath took the evidence to Zhao immediately. She found him in the Reckoning's command center, coordinating 3 separate battles across half the sector. He listened to her report without interrupting, his face becoming harder with each word. How many species are part of this? He asked. Just the Threnali, as far as I can tell. Chancellor Vex is leading it. And what do you think I should do, Ambassador? Kelrath hesitated. I think you should show restraint. Present the evidence to the council. Let us handle our own. No, Zhao said simply. He began issuing orders to his staff. All human forces are to withdraw from Threnali space immediately. Defensive positions only. No assistance to Threnali worlds regardless of the situation. Admiral, you cannot. Watch me. Within hours, every human ship left Threnali space. The Threnali celebrated, thinking they had won. Chancellor Vex gave speeches about council sovereignty and standing up to human tyranny. For 2 weeks, the Threnali felt proud and independent. Then the swarm arrived. Without human support, the Threnali defense forces lasted 4 days. Their shields failed. Their weapons proved ineffective. Their evacuation plans fell apart in panic. System after system fell. Billions of Threnali died screaming, consumed by the swarm or killed in the chaos of collapse. Kelrath watched the casualty reports with mounting horror. She went to Zhao and begged him to help. They betrayed us, Zhao said calmly. They tried to kill us while we were saving them. Why should we help them now? Because billions of innocent people are dying. People who had nothing to do with Vex's plotting. Yes, and those innocent people should have stopped their leaders from making stupid decisions. This is the price of betrayal. This is the lesson the galaxy needs to learn. If you want our protection, you accept our authority. If you want to be independent, you face the consequences. Chancellor Vex himself came to the human fleet, humiliated and desperate. He knelt before Zhao and begged for help. Zhao made him wait 3 hours before responding. We will save what remains of your species, Zhao said finally. But you personally will stand trial for treason against the war effort. And from now on, the Threnali have no vote in council matters. You are wards, not equals. It was a harsh punishment, but Vex accepted. He had no choice. The human fleet moved into Threnali space and crushed the swarm offensive. But they arrived too late to save most of the population. Of the 50 billion Threnali who had lived in those systems, only 3 billion survived. The council chamber felt different after that. The debates stopped. The protests ended. When Zhao spoke, everyone listened. They had learned what happened to species that challenged humanity during wartime. But Kelrath noticed something else. Some ambassadors now whispered in corners. They made secret communications. They were planning something for after the war ended. She realized the terrible truth. The galaxy was fighting two wars now. The war against the swarm and the war for what came after. Some species would accept human dominance. Others would resist. And when the swarm was finally defeated, the real conflict would begin. That night, Kelrath stood in her quarters and looked at old images of the council before the war. They had been peaceful then, naive, innocent. Those days were gone forever. The humans had saved them. But the price of salvation was becoming clear. The galaxy would survive, but it would never be the same. The age of peace had ended and nobody knew what came next. The war had raged for 18 months. Thousands of battles, millions dead. Entire systems reduced to debris fields. But now human intelligence had found something that changed everything. The swarm had a heart. Deep in uncharted space, hidden behind a nebula that blocked most sensors, was the Queen World. It was not a planet but a massive bioconstruct the size of a moon. Inside it lived the Swarm Queens, the central consciousness that controlled every swarm creature in the galaxy. Kill the queens and the swarm would die. Admiral Zhao stood before the largest gathering of council and human forces ever assembled. 500 ships from 40 species, all unified under human command. This was the final battle. Everything depended on this. The Queen World has defenses we cannot imagine, Zhao explained, highlighting a tactical display. We will lose ships. We will lose people. But if we succeed, the war ends today. Kelrath listened from her position on the Reckoning's observation deck. She had chosen to stay with the human fleet for this battle. If they failed, nowhere in the galaxy would be safe anyway. But as the fleet prepared to launch, Kelrath received an encrypted message. It was from a Karathi contact in Council intelligence. The message made her blood run cold. Chancellor Vex had not given up. He had been planning revenge for months. He had convinced a coalition of species that humanity was the real threat. Their plan was simple and brutal. Wait until the human fleet engaged the swarm, then attack from behind. Destroy both enemies at once. 20 council species had secretly committed ships to this betrayal. 200 vessels would hit the human fleet when they were most vulnerable. The plan was set to execute in 3 hours. Kelrath ran to find Zhao. She burst into the command center, ignoring protocols and security. Admiral, we have a problem. Zhao listened to her report with cold fury. Around him, human officers began pulling up tactical data, identifying which ships belonged to the conspiracy. The traitors had positioned themselves carefully, ready to strike at the perfect moment. Options? Zhao asked his tactical officer. We cannot fight the swarm and defend against betrayal simultaneously. We need to abort. No, Zhao's voice was final. We abort now, the swarm regroups. We lose our chance. We go forward, he turned to Kelrath. Which species are still loyal? Kelrath pulled up a list. The Valaxi, the core council worlds, about 15 species that had not joined the conspiracy, maybe 100 ships we can trust. Then we split the fleet. Loyal forces engage the swarm. Human forces prepare for both battles. He began issuing orders. Send a priority message to all loyal council ships. Tell them about the conspiracy. Give them a choice. Stand with us or stand aside. But if they stand with us, they stand all the way. The message went out across encrypted channels. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then ships began changing formation. The loyal council vessels moved to form a barrier between the human fleet and the conspirators. They were choosing sides. Chancellor Vex must have realized his plan was discovered because the conspiracy fleet attacked early. 200 ships opened fire on the loyalists, trying to break through to the human formation. The galaxy's second civil war began in an instant. Kelrath watched in horror as Council species killed each other. Threnali ships fought Karathi vessels. Former allies became enemies. The carefully built unity of the Council shattered like glass. But Zhao was already moving. Half the human fleet turned to face the traitors while the other half accelerated toward the Queen world. They were fighting two battles simultaneously. Exactly what everyone said was impossible. All ships, this is Admiral Zhao. Today we learn who deserves to survive. Engage all hostile forces, no mercy, no surrender. The battle was chaos. Human ships carved through the conspiracy fleet with brutal efficiency. They used the same tactics that had defeated the swarm. But this time against people they had protected. The traitors had made a fatal miscalculation. They thought humans weakened by war would be easy targets. They were wrong. Meanwhile, the assault force reached the Queen world. The swarm's defenses were immense. Bioships swarmed from hidden bays. Weapons that grew from the world's surface fired projectiles that could crack a dreadnought's armor. The assault force pushed forward anyway. Sergeant Maria Torres led a boarding team toward the world's surface. She had volunteered for this, knowing it was likely a one-way mission. 50 humans in powered armor, carrying enough explosives to crack a continent. Their dropships burned through the atmosphere, taking fire from every direction. Half the ships were destroyed before landing. Torres's ship crashed into the biomatter surface and she kicked open the door to find herself in hell. The surface was alive. It pulsed and moved. Swarm warriors erupted from the ground like nightmares. Torres's team formed a perimeter and fought their way toward the entrance they had identified. Every meter cost blood. Command, this is Torres. We are taking heavy casualties but advancing. I need... Her communication cut off as a swarm warrior tackled her. They rolled across the living ground, the creature's claws scraping her armor. Torres grabbed its mandibles and ripped them apart with augmented strength. She stood, grabbed her weapon, and kept moving. The entrance led down into the world's interior. The corridors were organic, pulsing with fluids that might have been blood. The air was thick with spores that would kill unprotected humans in seconds. Torres's team went deeper, following sensor readings toward the Queen's chamber. They found the chamber after 30 minutes of fighting. It was huge, a cathedral of living tissue. At the center, suspended in fluid, were the Queens, massive creatures that looked like a fusion of insect and nightmare. Their minds controlled trillions of swarm creatures across the galaxy. Plant the charges, Torres ordered. We have 5 minutes before this whole place knows we are here. Her team worked fast, placing antimatter explosives around the chamber. These weapons were banned by every civilized species. The humans did not care. They were here to end a war, not follow rules. The swarm realized what was happening. Warriors poured into the chamber from every entrance. Torres's team formed a circle and fought. They fired until their weapons overheated. They used knives and fists when ammunition ran out. They died one by one, buying seconds with their lives. Torres was the last one standing. She was surrounded by dead swarm warriors and dead humans. Her armor was breached in 3 places. She was bleeding, but the charges were armed. She activated the detonator and spoke one last time into her communicator. Command, this is Torres. Mission accomplished. It has been an honor. The antimatter explosion consumed the Queen world from the inside. The shockwave destroyed every ship within 10,000 kilometers. The Queens died instantly, and with them the swarm's coordination vanished. Across the galaxy, swarm creatures suddenly stopped. Without the Queen's direction, they became nothing but mindless organisms. Some died immediately. Others floated in space, inert and harmless. The war ended in a moment. But the battle between humans and the conspiracy fleet continued. Zhao showed no mercy. Every ship that had betrayed them was destroyed or forced to surrender. Chancellor Vex's flagship tried to escape and was cut in half by the Reckoning's main cannon. When the fighting finally stopped, Kelrath looked at the casualty reports and wept. 30,000 humans dead, 50,000 Council personnel, hundreds of ships destroyed. They had won the war, but the price was almost too high to bear. Admiral Zhao broadcast to the entire galaxy from the Reckoning's bridge. His face appeared on every screen, every station, every world. The swarm is defeated. The Queens are dead. You are safe. But let me be clear about what happens next. The galaxy will change. The Council as you knew it is over. Species that stood with us will have a voice in what comes next. Species that betrayed us have lost that right. He paused, his hard eyes seeming to look at everyone watching. Humanity is not leaving. We will protect those who want protection. We will trade with those who want peace. But we will not be dismissed or exiled again. The universe is dangerous. You need us, and if you try to remove us, you will learn what happens when you make enemies of Deathworlders. In the council chamber, the remaining ambassadors gathered to vote on a new compact. Kelrath had written it herself. The proposal was simple. Humanity would join the council with full membership. They would control all military operations. In exchange, they would protect council space and respect council law for civilian matters. The vote was not unanimous. Some species abstained, others voted against, but the majority supported it. They had learned their lesson. Security was not free. It required protectors capable of violence. Kelrath found Zhao after the vote on the observation deck where they had talked months before. He was looking at a star chart and she recognized the system he was viewing. Earth. "You can go home now," she said quietly. "The war is over." "Is it?" Zhao asked. "Or did we just win the first round?" "What do you mean?" "Some species will accept this new order. Others will resist. In 20 years, maybe 50, someone will decide they do not need human protection anymore. They will try to push us out again. And we will have to remind them why that is a bad idea." Kelrath felt tired. "So the war never ends?" "No, it just changes form. But at least your children will be alive to complain about it. That was the deal. That was the price of survival." He turned to look at her. "You asked me once if you made a mistake calling us back. The answer is still yes, but it was the right mistake. Sometimes the only way to survive is to make a deal with the devil, and we are your devil now, Ambassador, for better or worse." Zhao left her alone on the observation deck. Outside, the human fleet hung in space, silent and deadly. They were not monsters, Kelrath thought. Monsters did not choose to be what they were. Humans had chosen. They had decided that survival mattered more than being loved. They had become what they needed to be. The galaxy would remember the day the swarm was defeated. But they would also remember who defeated it. They would remember that when extinction came knocking, only the Deathworlders answered. And they would wonder late at night when they looked at the stars whether they had traded one nightmare for another. Kelrath did not have an answer. She only knew that they were alive. And sometimes that had to be enough. Far away on a ship heading toward Earth space, Sergeant Torres's name was added to a memorial wall alongside 50,000 others, heroes who had died so their species could survive. The last entry read simply, "They called, we came. We won." And somewhere in the darkness between stars, new threats waited, new enemies that would one day challenge the fragile peace. But when they came, they would face humanity, and they would learn what every predator eventually learns. There is always something more dangerous,